Okay, so we're going to talk about concept sketches. As you can see, it is a theory topic 4.1a, where you'll need to demonstrate an understanding of how to use annotated sketching and digital tools to graphically communicate ideas and sketch modelling to explore possible improvements in terms of a number of different requirements. So that sort of gives a clue to what design sketching is about. Design sketching is about communication. And as you can see from this graphic here, there are all sorts of ways you can use sketching in order to communicate your ideas. And there's a spectrum right from very quick idea sketches all the way up to really quite developed CAD rendered images like that presentation drawing, all these working diagrams, number 12. And the type of sketch, the type of visualization that you choose depends on the stage you are in your design cycle. So certainly at the front end, the idea is to create as many different ideas as possible, as quickly as possible. So it might start with a mind map of ideas, and then go on to quick sketching. And that's the stage we're at. We're at the concept creation stage. So we're going to really look at three main types of sketching. We're going to look at 2D sketching, 3D isometric drawing, and 3D perspective drawing. So the first, 2D sketching, it's the simplest way to communicate a shape, but it's not the most detailed way to communicate a shape. Really, in industrial design and product design, it's only really used to communicate quite complex shapes or quite organic shapes. So a trainer in this example here is quite an organic and complicated shape. If it were drawn in 3D, it might distort away from the graphics and the design. So the key to rapid 2D sketching, you're obviously looking at it from a projection, from either the top, the side, the front, the back, and you want to keep your lines flowing. So you can see that in these designs there's lots of construction geometry, so things like a center line running through and then maybe broken up into separate geometric shapes where you can design your component, whatever you're designing, in between those separate geometric shapes. And then the design's sort of built up further and further, and in this case it's been rendered to really highlight the different textures, the different materials. Obviously you can also add annotation, but the key is really building up using geometry, simple geometry, and building your nice flowing organic shape. So you can imagine a car design as well. A designer might sort of imagine the car on the floor and create these sweeping lines that you want from your car, and then create the car based out of that, doing all sorts of things to look really, really cool. So that's 2D sketching, really straightforward, the simplest form of sketching used to create complex organic shapes, and certainly can complement your more advanced 3D drawings. So the first introduction to 3D drawing has to be isometric drawing. Isometric drawing uses parallel lines to add depth to an image. That is, it's easy to do because parallel lines are easy to you can use this grid with which to do your isometric drawings. However, in real life, things get smaller as they go further away. So it is not very realistic and actually can give quite a distorted view of reality. So it's often used in CAD packages as an easy way to communicate a 3D image, and it can also be used in drawings like exploded drawings that you might find in instruction manuals that show how to put something together. It's rarely used at this stage, and actually it's rarely used beyond computer generated isometric drawings, but actually practicing and having a go at isometric drawing is a good way to understand how 3D sketching works. If you aren't really very good at 3D sketching, it's a really good start to that. So what you'll need to do this is some paper with an isometric grid on it, which looks a little bit like this grid here, and on that paper you can start drawing your shapes. So this is a face of a cuboid, and then to go back and give it some depth, I'm going to draw there, so that's the second face, and then to give it a top, I'm going to draw there. So you can see that if I were to draw another cuboid of the same size, it's exactly the same size as the previous one. There is no depth to this, so it starts to look a little bit distorted, like that. You can add complexity to these, so you can cut parts out, you can and if you're cutting parts out, then it does help if you start to think about hatching or shading or using coloured pencils to render things, and you can go off piste as well. So if we wanted to draw a triangle on the top, a four-sided triangle, we would go from the middle here, and figure out where the top of the triangle is here. So this is the top of our triangle, pyramid, sorry. And then I'd just connect the lines if I wanted to go slightly off piste and do something a little bit more creative. Cylinders also, you would start with a cuboid shape, and then imagine within that cuboid shape how your cylinder is going to work. So on this top surface here, I want to draw a circle at the top of my cylinder, and that's going to need to touch all four sides of my top shape, and then I can just draw down from the top there, and draw the base of my cylinder there. So the idea here, and it's a key principle of perspective sketching, is using crating. That's using standard geometric shapes and then building up a more complex design from there. And that leads us into what we're really aiming for, what we're striving towards, which is perspective sketching. And that's really the key. If you're doing design sketches, they should be in perspective. So you can see here, we've got various cubes, and they look more realistic because they've got depth to them. They get smaller as they get further away. To start perspective sketching, if you haven't done it before, then the basics start with imagining a horizon line. So you wouldn't usually sketch this, but just to start, we're going to sketch the horizon line. Usually you can just imagine it. And on our horizon line sit two vanishing points. There are different ways to draw in perspective, but this is the standard model, the standard method to draw in perspective. So between those, I'm going to draw a cube and I'm going to draw it in perspective. So start with my front edge, and then my sides connect up to the vanishing points. This is a long side of a cube, almost like a wall going off into the distance. So the rules are simple. Every line is either vertical or going to a vanishing point. So there's a vertical line there, and then the other side going out to this vanishing point, and a vertical line connecting that. And then the top of our cuboid is exactly the same. So the rule is every line either vertical or to a vanishing point. So the top of our cuboid goes off to the vanishing point. That's slightly skewiffed, sorry. And that goes off to the vanishing point there as well. And that gives us a cube in perspective. Now, of course, we don't want to draw that horizon line all the time. So once you get a bit more confident with perspective sketching, we'll expect you to be sketching cuboids that get smaller as they go further away, without using your horizon. And actually, if you imagine your horizon as somewhere off the paper, then it gives you a more realistic perspective. If your vanishing points are on the paper, then it's a little bit distorted. So once again, just like isometric drawing, in perspective sketching, we'll use cuboid shapes to build up more complicated structures. And we just obey the rules. So we make sure everything gets smaller as it goes further away. So if we wanted to have this going out into the distance here, we just make sure it gets smaller. And we'd want to imagine a line from the back here as well. So that would go out that way, and then our line's going across here. Don't be afraid to draw lots of construction geometry when you're doing your sketches. So within that, if we were drawing a sphere on the side here, just like before, our circle on the top needs to touch the middle of each of the longer sides here. It's a bit of a technique that you need to practice, but you'll get used to it after practicing it a few times. And I'm just going to imagine this as complete here and drawing a circle at the bottom, and then connect those up to create a cylinder. And my cylinder will attach to this. Now, it looks a little bit complicated using the Surface Pen because I don't have the ability really to apply pressure like you would with a pencil. You'd obviously start sketching in a very light way and then slowly build up the actual shape you want using a bit more pressure to make your sketch really stand out. But you can sort of get the gist of what I'm sketching here is a cylinder and then a rectangular shape back here like that. And if you really have to, you can use a rubber to make things a little bit more clear. If we wanted to find the centre of this face, then the quickest way to find the centre of a shape is to draw an X between 2 points, and we've got our centre here. And if we wanted something to come out of that, we just again need to imagine our perspective points there, so we could draw the sort of cylinder coming out of that as well, and all sorts of things like that. You can see in these examples here that you can, if you're using perspective sketching well, you can draw some really quite complex shapes, some more organic shapes like this one here can look really cool. And there are a couple of techniques that have been used here. So sketching in shadows and behind your design, imagining the light, helps make your design just stand out a little bit more, gives it a bit more depth. And what's also been done here is the designer has used a thicker outside line. So any edges that are disappearing off have been done a little bit thicker, and that also helps your design stand out a bit more. Obviously, with any type of designing that you're going to be doing, annotation is really important. All this annotation is a bit too small to read, but annotation's absolutely key. So your designs will need to have a significant amount of annotation to describe the movement, the materials, the design thinking behind things. And you can use arrows as well. And a little bit of sensitive rendering is also good to use. Remember that these are the sorts of things you're trying to describe in your design sketching. Cool. And the key is really just to go out and to practice to sketch as much as possible. It's a skill like many others, so just practice as much as possible until you get really good at it.